Former Space Shuttle Captain Jon McBride.
This is really a special occasion for me. And Tracy's my lady. Many years. To be here for our first time in Ireland together. I've been in Ireland many, many times. I try to get over at least once every year or two to pump up my blood, get it back in condition. Enough statin, no Guinness. A few Guinness each day. So Ireland has been and will always be in my blood. My family goes back to. I thought we always came from Cork because of records. When I went back, my dad told me all of his folks came from Cork, but I did some further research and found out that's where they got on the boat. And when they went to New York and got off on Ellis Island, where are you coming from? Cork, because that's where they got on the boat. But I came over and did some research and found out we came from Donegal. Yes. I met Jon McBride in Donegal, who's a big fish operator up there. So he's about my fourth grandfather removed. So we do have a wonderful connection in Ireland. It's always a wonderful time for me to be here and visit my heritage, which I'm very proud of. As a matter of fact, both sides of my mom and my dad were both Irish descent. So I feel like I'm 100% Irish. So it's really nice to be back here. Thank you. Obviously, let's see, which one's the pointer here? That's my baby picture. When I joined NASA, kind of a movement through the history up to the near current status. I want to be the oldest guy to go into space. John Glenn holds that distinction now, our first American to circle the Earth. John and I were great friends. He was one of my idols. When we picked our first 7 astronauts, it inspired me and got me busy and working and concentrating on doing something good with my life, which I try to transfer to the youngsters that I get to talk to start thinking about it today. And maybe one of these days you'll get to follow in my footsteps. But John Glenn was a very dear friend of mine, and he's the oldest guy to go into space so far. I told him before we lost him a couple of years ago, I was going to break his record. I said, well, go for it. Go for it. Good luck. I still have a couple, 3 years to go. So I had some gerontologists would go and study the series of aging you see here, kind of forecasted the future to see what I would look like when I'm old enough to break that record. And they studied it for about a week and came back and just said we were all didn't look a lot like this guy. I've got a shot at it. We have been, we in America have been launching men and women into space since 1961. As a matter of fact, Russia launched a man in May of 1961. It was June of April, Yuri Gagarin launched one. He actually went around the Earth one time. So Yuri's only the first man to go into space, but also the first one to circle the Earth. I never got to meet Yuri. He died in a plane crash many years before I got to be friends with the Russians. It wasn't until about 1985 that I met my first cosmonauts. And it was really a wonderful thing for me to reach out and meet these guys who were adversaries for so many years, to sit and have vodka with friends who we were dreaming of shooting each other down. Ended up being some of the best friends in the world. But in America, it all started with Alan Shepard back in 1961, who flew a month after Yuri Gagarin, who circled the Earth once. Alan Shepard just went up and back into the Atlantic Ocean, a suborbital flight. It went until, about a few months later, that John Glenn, right here, actually became the first American to circle the Earth. And he went around 3 times. And we knew after Alan Shepard was successful in suborbital and John Glenn was successful in the orbiting flight that we could press onward and upward. So we had selected our first 7 astronauts called the Mercury 7. How about that? 7 of them, they were going to fly the Mercury, very novel, Mercury 7. So. And all of them got to fly a Mercury capsule except for Deke Slayton, right here. And I'm very blessed to have gotten to know each and every one of these guys except for Gus Grissom, who we lost in a fire, Apollo fire, with 3 astronauts while I was still in college. But I got to know Alan Shepard was one of my dearest friends, and Scott Carpenter was one of my dearest friends. He stayed with me in West Virginia several times, my home state. So, was I blessed? Yes, I was. I love to use that word, blessed. I haven't had the opportunity to meet my idols. And I've essentially known every astronaut and cosmonaut since we started this whole thing. From all these countries, including your folks here from England. As president of all the astronauts and cosmonauts, I got to meet all the folks around the world that have flown. So it's been a wonderful career for me to watch Alan and the Mercury guys and the Gemini. In America, we had to first learn how to get up there and back, so we built that one little person capsule called Mercury, which allowed us to get into space and come back, circle the Earth, learn how to eat, learn how to go to the loo. All those things we had to practice and learn basically in Mercury, Gemini. And finally, we built the spacecraft that allowed us to go to the moon, called Apollo. So from one person in Mercury, 2 in Gemini, and 3 now in the Apollo spacecraft, we lifted off and went to the moon. I'm very lucky. I told the couple of you back in 1960, I got to meet John Kennedy. He was campaigning for the presidency, and he came through my little state of West Virginia. Tracy and I are both from West Virginia. Campaigning, and they didn't give him much of a chance in those days because he was a Catholic. Can't elect a Catholic as president of the United States. How are they going to do that? We came to West Virginia, which is about 4% Catholic population, and won about 80% of the popular vote. So the rest of America said, maybe this is not a problem. So a year later, we know it wasn't because he was nominated and elected as president. I had the foresight, I guess you could say, to get his autograph, which he signed for me. I gave to my son later on in the years. Now he's got maybe 40 or more than 40 of our 50 or so presidents since he started. I had gotten all of them since Kennedy and started off his collection. So it was a wonderful opportunity for me to meet John Kennedy. It was very sad when we lost him. What a sad day that was in America to lose John Kennedy. So we moved into Mercury and the Gemini and finally got to the Apollo era, which we needed 3 people in the Apollo spacecraft to actually go to the moon. 3 people would get there in the command module. 2 would get in the lunar lander and go down and make the landing, while 1 stayed in the command module. And then the 2 would come up and join, and they would all come back to Earth together. So it took 3 people to do those lunar landings. And the first one was Apollo 11. John Kennedy in 1961 said, we're going to go to the moon before the end of this decade. Anybody remember that statement? People in America are going a little wacky, isn't they? Can't do that in 8 years. We did it. We built the Mercury and flew it successfully. Built the Gemini, learned how to do spacewalks, learned how to rendezvous and dock, spacecraft in orbit, which we needed to do before we could go to the moon and back. And one of the crew stayed up there for 2 weeks, 2 people, to prove that you could live in the weightlessness of space for long enough time to go to the moon, make a descent, land, walk, come back up, and come back to Earth. So during those Mercury Gemini, we learned all the basics that we needed to head off to the moon. And finally, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first 2 Americans to go down, walk on the moon in Apollo 11 in July 1969. So we fulfilled that challenge issued by President Kennedy back earlier. But it's sad that he did not live long enough to see that. So that's the saddest part. That JFK, who was the father of America's space program, didn't live long enough to see our men walk on the moon. We used our very last Apollo spacecraft in 1975 to send 3 astronauts into space, including Deke Slayton, a member of our Mercury 7. All the 6 of those guys, Mercury 7, flew the Mercury capsule, and Deke, they thought he had a heart problem, so then they let him fly. It took about 10 or 15 years for them to determine that his heart problem wasn't really a problem. So as a reward, he turned out to be the astronaut office director for 10 or 15 years, and as a reward, they ended up finally finding out that his heart was barely good enough to fly in space. They let him go and fly on the Apollo-Soyuz mission. Deke was on board with Tom Stafford and Vance Brand as we launched 3 Americans from Kennedy and the Apollo, and our friends Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov launched out of Kazakhstan in a Soyuz, and the Apollo and the Soyuz joined together in 1975, and the first joint effort between 2 nations to work together in space. It's a great day for all of us. The whole time they were doing those Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, I was doing this, flying these Phantom jets on and off an aircraft carrier. As soon as this guy touches the deck, this guy pushes a button here, and I'm 3 seconds, I'm going 180 miles an hour. The only thing you do is hold the throttle forward and the stick back and hang on, hope everything works. After about 3 seconds, you can see well enough to fly the airplane. Coming back on the other end is just as harrowing. I'm approaching about 150 miles an hour. I've got 6 feet of clearance on each wingtip to get in between those two white lines and catch a wire. With my tail hook, there's 4 wires running across here, and I've got to catch one of them with this tail hook right here. I still have nightmares. It's fun in the daytime. Try this at night. When the ceiling's down about 200 feet above the sea, you got about a half or a quarter mile of visibility, and the ship is rolling, pitching, and heaving, and you're going to land on it. And keep your wings between these two white lines and catch one of those wires. It's the most exacting form of aviation. I think that's why more than half, 60% of the American astronauts, pilots, came from the United States Navy. So that's one of the reasons I took the route I took from college into the United States Navy. I was very fortunate to put my application in with several thousand other people in 1977, I guess. It took about a year process to go from. We heard they took in about 10,000 applications that they looked at pretty seriously. The first cut went down to about 1,000 on paper. Then out of that final 1,000, they would bring, they had 200 finalists. Now, I got a notice that I was in the 200 finalists. Yay! Can I go all the way? So out of the final 200, they would invite 20 for maybe 10 weeks each. Spend a whole week in Houston, Texas, going through the psychiatric, physical, psychological investigations and experiments to see if you were qualified. I mean, they knew more about me after that week than I knew about myself. And during the 6-month process, they talked to everybody that ever knew me, every member of my family, every neighbor I ever had, everybody I shared classroom activities with. And I guess you could say I was lucky because after about a year of process, I finally got chosen with the very first class of space shuttle astronauts. I'm right here. We're alphabetically from Guy Woodford, our first African American, to Shannon Lucid, one of our first American women. Sally Ride was our first American woman in space, and I got to fly with her in space. But 35 new guys, that's what we called ourselves, the TFNG, 35 new guys. One of my license plates on my car has TFNG on it back in Florida. So I was very proud and honored to be in that group of astronauts that were chosen specifically to fly space shuttle. It's an international group now. I'm right here. I was co-president with Alexei Leonov, who you saw earlier, of the whole body of astronauts now. Now, I think, counting West Virginia, where I'm from, there's 32 nations who've flown people into space. So it's including most of the British Isles and all the European countries. And of course, most of the majority come from Russia and America. But in this photograph, there's myself and Alexei. First, we got this, first Bulgarian, Eoghan. First, let's see, Polish, Miroslav Hermaszewski. First, Chinese, Yang Li Wei. First, Iranian, Anousheh Ansari. Canadian, Chris Hatfield. First, Romanian, Dora Prunariu. First, Belgian, Dirk Fribourg. The first woman ever to fly into space, Valentina Tereshkova. And I know all these people by their first hand, their first names, remember their homes, and a lot of their kids because I was president of a whole group called the Association of Space Explorers. So it was really one of the honors of my life to be co-president with Alexei, who was my idol. I remember when Alexei flew and became the first man to walk in space. I admired him then. It was much more of a wonderful thing for me to not only be a member, but to be the co-president with Alexei for 2 years of my life. This is about 4 years ago now. We have our annual meeting of ASE in a different country every year. And this happened to be in China with Yang Li Wei, first Chinese, Mamoru Mori, first Japanese, and Jon McBride, first West Virginia. So very in China at the Beijing Space Training Center. I've been to all these training centers around the world, but when I went to China and saw what they got, I was really impressed. It seems like they had studied the Russian space program pretty well. They knew everything about our space program. So when I went to Beijing outside to their training center, it was better than anything I've ever seen. I mean, they really got a first-class operation going over there. Back many years ago, as we were flying our first space shuttle called Columbia over the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where we all lived and trained. We were busy training John Young and Bob Crippen to Navy pilots like myself to fly the first mission, and finally got the Columbia launched on April the 12th, 1981. We wanted to fly this shuttle as early as 1978 when my class showed up there, but it took a lot longer to get it developed and get it tested and finally launch it into space with only 2 astronauts, 2 Navy guys like myself, to make sure we could get it up there, fly it around, bring it home safely before we started increasing the crew size. I was high overhead Kennedy, my little supersonic jet with Bob and Cripp lifted off, and I was the emergency chase pilot, they call it. And if they'd had to come back and land at Kennedy, I would have joined with them and flown down there to land at Kennedy, which thankfully they didn't have to do. They went into space, flew around 35 times, and I got to meet them 2 days later out in Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert in California to make our joint looking about 8 miles above the Earth. But I was going as fast as I could possibly go in this jet, full throttle. And they were slowing down as slow as they ever could get when we met. And I had to time this, and we practiced it for days. This rendezvous was probably the most complicated rendezvous in the history of aviation. But got this airplane going as fast as it can. The space shuttle going about as slow as it could go. We had a 3-second window to get together. So it worked. I got to fly over the last 40,000 feet, last 5 minutes down with Space Shuttle Columbia as Bob Crippen and John Young were back and landed in California at Edwards. I'm very lucky as a Navy guy. We trade pilots every year for test pilot training. We send one Navy guy in Edwards Air Force Base for Air Force training, and an Air Force guy comes to Navy flight test. And I was lucky to be the Navy guy that went out to Edwards, and I got to fly all the Air Force airplanes, 35 of them during my year of test pilot training, come back to the Navy, fly all of my airplanes. So guess what? And when NASA rolled up and rolled around and said we're looking for people to fly space shuttles, I felt like I was in a pretty good position. I mean, done graduate work and flown all the airplanes and made sure I knew all the astronauts and were on active duty. So we first started with 2 people, then we added crew members. We always wanted to get to 7. We started with 4 after we flew the first 4 flights with 2 people. Then we flew flight of 4, then 5, then 6, then on flight number 8 we took our first crew of 6, and I took the first crew of 7. That's me there on the left. And we were the first, not only the first crew of 7, but then the first Australian, Paul Scully Power, first Canadian, Mark Garneau, first flight with 2 women, and the first West Virginia. That's me right there. So it really was in the early days of flying space shuttles, each and every mission set new records. And I think we had the record for the total number of accomplishments on this flight of the Challenger, which I was honored to fly on. We go through a lot of training, obviously, to live and work in space, and one of our favorite things is called the Vomit Comet. It's a Boeing 707, a KC-135, the military designation where we can get this airplane going as fast as it'll go, pull the nose almost straight up, and then the pilots push over. You fly across the top of a parabolic maneuver, we call it, for about 40 seconds from nose straight up to nose back down toward the earth. You can float inside and weightlessness, 0 G we call it, but it only lasts for 30 or 40 seconds. And we call it the Vomit Comet because we do about 40 of these maneuvers in a 3-hour period. Up and down. 3G pull up, 0 G over the top. 3G's to pull out, accelerate, pull up, push over. So you can see after 40 of those things, my Canadian friend says, I've had enough here. I'm going to sit down and take a rest. Navy guys, we just eat it up. To be a pilot, to fly the space shuttle, we also configured some, we call them shuttle training airplanes, or corporate jets, that we configured the left side like a space shuttle and the right side like a regular cockpit. And my flight instructor would take me up to about 40,000 feet above the earth. I would make the final 4-minute approach and landing of the space shuttle. I've done that probably 500 or 600 times in that airplane, from all different aspects, different ranges, different approaches. And so you feel like by the time you fly the space shuttle, you get me near the field with enough energy and I will get you to the runway. We'll make a nice, soft, safe landing. That's the kind of confidence you must live off with. We spent a lot of time in a diving tank at Houston. It's a 12 feet deep, with the whole pool is 12 feet deep, so we can get our spacewalkers in their spacesuits and submerge them in the water like you see here, and it's just about exactly the perfect replication of being in zero gravity. But putting the right amount of weight on each waist and wrist and knee and ankle, you can make the body buoyant so that it floats in the middle of the pool. It gives you really the perfect feeling of practicing in space. The big difference is you can see the bubbles go at the top of the pool and you feel the friction of the water. But it's as close as we can get for hours and hours of simulation of zero gravity in this diving tank. I'll get my scuba gear while my spacewalkers get in their flight suits and go down and practice everything they're doing. I'm watching and observing because it's my job when we get into space to help them get in their suits, monitor their progress when they're outside, and help them come back in and get desuited. We're the first flight to launch at night. It was technically near dawn, right around 7 o'clock in the morning in the winter. So as I lifted off and headed eastward out of Kennedy, out over the Atlantic heading toward you, we got to see our first sunrise. What a gorgeous event. Each and every one of those. You never thought of this maybe, but every time we go around the Earth, half the orbits between the sun and the Earth, so have daylight, and half the orbits behind the Earth, so have darkness. When transition from one to the other, have a sunrise, 45 minutes of daylight, and a sunset. 45 minutes of darkness and a sunrise. So 16 of those every day, because I circled the Earth 16 times. So I got to see my first sunrise on liftoff, and probably my most memorable. Took the first crew of 7, had them all lined up in position. That's me, obviously, right there. Sally Rye, Kathy Sullivan, Mark Garneau from Canada, Paul Scully, Power Australia, Bob Griffith, and David Least. Had everybody get in the same position as our pre-flight portrait, and put the camera on delay and made it snap a picture, and that's what we look like. See, the faces are redder, fatter. That's because when you get into zero gravity, all this extra fluid in our legs, our stomach is moved up. It fills up your chest, fills up your face. Everybody, I lost probably 8 pounds of body fluid. That's about 2.5 gallons. And that happens to everybody because all this fluid moves upward, readjusting to weightlessness. So the body says, go to the loo. So we spent a lot of time in the first day or two going to the bathroom, and I lost about 8 pounds, which is about 1.5 gallons of body fluid. And that's typical for somebody. Once after 2 days, I hear you also get taller. I got 2 inches taller because every one of your spinal column and joints and knee and ankle, since there's no pressure of gravity, they all separate a little bit. So in the absence of gravity, you get taller, you get lighter. I hear you. I want to go, coach. Put me in. Send me in. It's a temporary thing. Back on Earth, the first few moments on Earth, you're starting to acquire gravity, sense gravity through your semicircular canals in your ears. I've flown airplanes for many, many years. It's the most horrible feeling I've ever experienced. Was the first 5 or 10 minutes back on Earth as you're starting to feel gravity. It's starting to work on your ears, and starting to compress your body back to normal size. It takes a day or 2 back on Earth to regain it. The longer you're up there, the longer the recovery period. For an 8-day mission, it still took me 1 or 2 days to readjust to living back on Earth. Some photography from space, my home state of Florida. Actually, I'm from up here in West Virginia. We live in Florida right here. When you come and see us, Guess what this is? Cape Kennedy. And the Kennedy Space Center is right on the tip there. That's why we launch here, because everything, any problems, it all goes underwater. And we can launch across the ocean. So you're looking down into Miami or the Keys, Florida, Key West out here in Cuba, up into Alabama, Georgia, up in there, and South Carolina, North Carolina. You're almost up to Washington, D.C. here at the top of the frame. We could look at on a nice clear day in Florida, you can see the whole state of Florida. This is probably 100 miles above the earth. I took a 250 millimeter lens flying directly over the Kennedy Space Center. This is what it looks like. This is the visitors complex when you come and see us. And we'll put you on a bus, take you out here and let you see the vehicle assembly building, go to launch pad 39A, where all the guys that went to the moon. SpaceX is using it now for their launches. And 39B, these were built for space shuttle, are being used now for all the future generation of space flights. This is our shuttle landing runway, where we come back and land from going around in orbit around the Earth. We draw a line right through there. This is Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where the military launch pads are down here. So this is kind of a civilian launch pads at Kennedy and the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station there. Takes about 8 minutes. Well, let's back up. This is on the orbit tour. I was flying over Washington, D.C. This is a good look at our nation's capital. You can see Dulles Airport, where a lot of you probably landed, and Andrews Air Force Base to the east, the road up to Baltimore. This is called the Chesapeake Bay down here, and this is the Potomac River running through Washington and down into West Virginia, right here where I live over there. So a good look at Washington, D.C. Now we're on the other side. Anybody recognize this? We're right here. Right there. And, my family's from up here in Donegal, up on the northern coast. Of course, Cork is just off the photo, Galway, and Belfast over here, Holyhead in Wales. I keep telling all my dear friends from Ireland, England, and the others, you give us a good clear day, we'll take a good clear picture. We're still waiting. One of these days, all the British Isles, Ireland and the British Isles are going to be free of clouds, but it hasn't happened yet. It's on the other side of England, the cliffs of Dover, London, and the Thames River out into the North Sea, or the west coast of France, Calais, the English Channel. So, got thousands of these photographs. I picked out some close here. This is looking through the Straits of Gibraltar, all of northern Africa, southern Spain, the Pyrenees Mountains. This is typical, looking out the window. At one moment, I'm moving 6 miles per second. So give me another minute, I'm over here looking, and give me another one orbit later, I'm on the east side of the Mediterranean. It looks like this. Pick up the Suez Canal, the Nile River, Cairo, the tip of the Sinai. If you're Israeli, this is a Gulf of Eilat. If you're a Jordanian, it's the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Dead Sea. You can see that very delineated border between Israel and Egypt here, the Palestine, and up into Syria, and Jordan, and a little tip of Cyprus, up into around the Horn, and Greece and Turkey. Sudan, Ethiopia, over in Saudi Arabia. So that one picture is 10 or 12 nations. That's kind of typical of looking out one window at one moment. Remember, you're changing 6 miles every second. So if we're changing view out the window, we don't have a lot. We don't send people up there just to enjoy, look out. You enjoy your Earth flying around when you got things to do. But every time you have a busy or a moment where you're not busy, every astronaut will tell you the first thing they do is go to the nearest window and peek out for the minute or two they have to observe the Earth. This would be up in northern India, up in Himalaya Plateau, Tibet, and finally coming home and landing. We're the first runway, or first space shuttle to actually land on our Kennedy runway, 33 there at the Kennedy Space Center. We always wanted to land on this runway because that minimizes the turnaround time to get it ready for its next flight. All the previous shuttles had landed in California in the desert, make sure we could land them before we started landing at Kennedy. But it could, depending on the weather, it could be a week or 10 days to get the shuttle on the back of the 747 and flying across the country back to Florida. So obviously we would wait a few days to see if we could effect a landing here at the Kennedy Space Center itself. Thankfully, we've got 45 minutes or an hour inside the shuttle left. The wheels come to stop to get up. Because we're now starting to sense gravity. If you haven't had it for 9 days, all of a sudden this G vector works on your body and compressing your spine again. So I can remember after 45 minutes, thankfully we've got 45 minutes inside before we have to get up and leave or walk out of the shuttle, go down the ladder. Because we had to make it, we practiced emergency exits and training. Thankfully, we never had to do it. I don't think we could have effected an emergency landing. We'd be falling all over each other, falling down the ladder, falling off the shuttle, because it's just you feel like you weigh 2,000 kilos. It feels like it's about as deep as a beach ball. And just taking a step is a very difficult thing for the first few minutes back on Earth. So you see everybody still holding on, watching every step. You don't want to fall down in front of these guys. You don't want to photograph of you falling off the space shuttle. It's the best way to end your career. You don't want to do that. Well, the next challenge obviously is Mars, but we haven't done that challenge yet. We haven't driven the stake in the ground, or Congress hasn't given us the funding. I don't know what it's going to take. We American, I'm talking as an American right now, we need that challenge. I think our parts of the world need that challenge right now. I'd love to see our new president, if he would. We've been trying to get him to do something radical like Kennedy did. Why not challenge us to go to Mars? It's expensive, believe me. But we've done research on the things that took us to get to the moon cost a lot of money, but we've gotten about, some independent studies shown anywhere from $5 to $10 in return for every dollar that was invested in the space activities that allowed us to go to the moon. So that's a pretty good investment, not only for the youngsters who aspire to go do what I got to do, but also for the general economy and the welfare of the nation. There's all kinds of parameters that I think go along hand in hand with a good, strong space program. So I'd love to see our new president, if he would, stand up and do sort of a Kennedy-esque type of a challenge to. I've got to need something like that. I'm hoping that, I had hoped for the last year or so we'd see a big movement on this current administration to do something, like I said, Kennedy-esque, to challenge us to do some, and that's not a, it costs a lot of money, and we spend a lot of money, but you look at the, afterwards during Apollo and the following on years, America was some of the most profitable, higher-riding, successful educational standards, economic standards, all highest they've ever been in the 60s and 70s when we were doing the Apollo program. It cost a lot of money, but it generated a lot of money. And I'm one of those believers that a good, strong science program, space program leads to a good, strong economical position. So I felt that way for years, and I'll feel that way well into the future. I'd hope that President Trump would stand up and do something. He's done a lot of things like Kennedy did. I was hoping to do something like that with regard to space. I've always been a believer. My grandfather, one of the strongest role models of my life, was a minister, a Methodist minister. Had strong beliefs. I think whatever beliefs I had were enhanced. And when you get up there and look back at this globe of ours, and that environment with the space in the background, you see it as an entirety. You've got to believe that there's something else that made this happen. It just didn't happen on its own. So if you want to believe in God or any God, this is a good time to do it. Because I firmly believe that this thing just didn't pop up on its own. There's got to be some powerful force out there that's affected it. I'll always believe that. I haven't seen him or her, but I guarantee you I believe it. And I'm ready to meet him. I've been to China, visited their training center, seen their astronaut offices, which If you go to China and you see their space complex, they took the best of everything we've got at all our space centers in America and built theirs, framed around it. You've got to take our 5 space centers, 5 man, would have to do with manned spacecraft, and put them all in one position. That's what they got outside of Beijing. So I was awestruck. I was amazed at the 2 days I spent there. Yang Li Wei, their chief, opened up the day, toured me, and showed me everything. There's no big secrets because they know they got a good thing going. So yeah, if we just sit here and do nothing, I'll be watching Yang and be the first guy to step back on the moon, and maybe one of the first ones to go on Mars. Like I say, if you go over there and visit their quarters and their research buildings and all their other things, it's almost stamped with molds of what we've done. But they're funding their program. They've learned a lot from us. We have a lot of Chinese folks come to America and study science and space and go back to their country and pump them up. So they're right up there. Right? It wouldn't surprise me to see a Chinaman be the first guy back on the moon. It would not surprise me whatsoever. I don't think we've got any life on our planet other than here on Earth. I question that sometimes. But I think our planet's the only one that could sustain life as we know it in our solar system. Now you carry that a step further. We've already identified Earth-like bodies in outside of our solar system in our near universe. So I think it'd be idiotic for me to stand here in front of you and try to convince you that we're the only body in this universe of the trillions. We don't even know how many there are. Trillions of bodies floating around the universe. And we're the only one that houses life as we know it. Maybe as we know it, it might be. Because we're very individualistic. I mean, it took several millennium for us to form into the humanity that we have today. But even with those odds, I would say there's a very good chance, if I could substantiate my bet somewhere or another, I would bet to somewhere out there right now, there's a local inhabitant of a planet, somewhere in this universe, talking to a group of other inhabitants of their planet, explaining how exciting it was to go around the planet, spend time in orbit. So that could be going on somewhere in this universe right now. I firmly believe that's possible. That's a roundabout way of answering that question. I don't know how else to answer that. Distinct possibility when you look at the odds. The biggest complication is enough equipment and food. If you're going to send 3 or 4 people and you want to eat all the fresh food every day, can you imagine how big that spacecraft would be? It'd be like this room. And we can't afford that. We'll never have the propulsion systems or way of storage and all those things. So the one thing that will come out of the Mars experiment and the Mars journey will be the ability, we call it closed loop ecological system. The ability to recycle and reuse everything. I'm talking everything. There's no waste in the system. We can't fly 3 or 4 people for a year over. You can only go when the planets are close enough, right? You can't fly through the sun to get to Mars. That would run it all day. So we're going to go to Mars when they're closest, spend probably another year, and then start back when we come back in phase again. So we get the minimum travel time from Earth to Mars. So that's a 3-year endeavor for 3 or 4 people. And imagine the food requirements. So we've got number one, we call it a closed loop ecological system where everything, including human waste, will be refactored back into the equation. We're learning a lot of those on space station now, but you can't take enough fresh food and water for a crew of 3 or 4 for 2 or 3 years to go to the moon or Mars and back to Earth. So that one technology, just think what that'll do for Earth. They're teaching us here on Earth how to recycle and reuse essentially everything we have. There are so many of us now that we've been dumping resources into the earth fields for so long that I know it, 30 years ago wasn't a problem. There was so much natural resources, and there were so few of us that you could just keep expending it at an asymptotic rate, not worry about it. We've got plenty of gold, we've got plenty of silver, we've got lots of coal, we've got lots of petroleum, so why worry? Well, guess what? There is none, and we're running out of some of that stuff. So before that gets to that stage, we need, as human beings and from all around the world, develop a better method of recycling and reusing on a continuing basis, or we're We're limiting ourselves. Our destiny is limited. We can't keep supporting ourselves with the way we're doing it, with all the resources that we're expending every day at the rate we're expending them. So we got to do something about that. And space is that. I'm going to stop. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be here tonight.